Risi. Provo platformën TV Alb Falas me mbi 200 kanale shqip nga të gjitha trojet shqiptare, plus 2000 kanale nga e gjithë bota. Gjithashtu TV Alb ju ofron pakon e Digital dhe Tring TV. TV Alb është e vetmja platformë shqiptare që mund ta shkarkoni aplikacionin në Smart TV. Gjithashtu me një abonim shikon në 3 pajisje në të njëjtën kohë Falas. TV Alb e vetmja platformë legale në Amerikë dhe Kanada. Vizito webfaqen tvalb.com apo kontaktoni në numrin 877 448 8252.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for being here today at this special event as we celebrate the incredible work of Wendy Steiner, The Beauty of Choice on Woman Arts and Freedom. I am honored to be your host for this afternoon. First, I would like to invite Wendy Steiner, Professor James, and Ambassador Vigil Kuda to have a seat over here. Today is not just about a book, it's about the powerful themes it represents: woman, art, and the freedom of expression. We have a wonderful lineup of guests who will share their thoughts, and of course, we'll hear from the author herself. Before we begin, I would like to invite everyone to stand as we honor the national anthems of United States of America, Albania, and Kosovo. Thank you, everyone. Now it is my pleasure to introduce you our first guest speaker, Bora Balaj. Bora is the secretary of the esteemed organization Skanderbeu, an accomplished author in many literary work. Her contribution to Albanian literary and culture discussions have been invaluable. Please join me in welcoming Bora Balaj.
Të nderuar musafir, të dashur bashkëdhetar, miq të Kosovës dhe të lirisë. Sot jemi mbledhur për të festuar një nga ditët më të rëndësishme në historinë tonë kombëtare, 17 vjetorin e pavarësisë së Kosovës. Kjo nuk është thjesht vetëm një datë në kalendarin tonë, por një kujtesë e rrugës së gjatë, sakrificave dhe ëndrrës së brezave ndër shekuj për një Kosovë të lirë dhe pavarur. Në këtë përvjetor, kujtojmë me nder dhe mirënjohje të thellë ata që bënë të mundur këtë ditë. Presidentin historik Ibrahim Rugova me vizionin e tij dhe urtësinë e tij që na udhëheqi drejt lirisë me mençuri dhe diplomaci. Komandantin legjendar Adem Jasharin, bashkë me Uçekën dhe familjen e tij që dhanë jetën për idealin e Kosovës së lirë. Përulemi me respekt para sakrificës së gjithë atyre burrave dhe grave që luftuan për këtë ditë. Një mirënjohje veçantë u takon edhe miqve tanë ndërkombëtar e sidomos në atë kohë presidentit Bill Clinton, i cili në momentet më kritike u rrështua në anën e drejtësisë dhe të popullit Kosovës duke hapur rrugën për ndërhyrje dhe përsërimin e vendit tonë. Shpallja pavarësisë së Kosovës me 17 shkurt 2008 ishte një akt historik që kurorëzoi përpjekjen shekullore për liri, duke e bërë ngjarjen më të rëndësishme pas shpalljes pavarësisë së Shqipërisë në vitin 1912. Kjo pavarësi është trashëgimia jonë më e çmuar dhe një përgjegjësi për të mbrojtur, zhvilluar dhe lartësuar Kosovën me dinjitet. Përveç kësaj, festa madhështore sot është edhe më madhështore për shkak se jemi mbledhur me nderin të promovojmë librin The Beauty of the Choice on Women, Art on Freedom, nga autorja Wendy Steiner. Ky libër trajton historitë thelbësore për njerëzimin, duke dhënë një zë të fuqishëm artit, lirisë dhe të drejtave të grave. Në kapitullin e 10, Wendy Steiner sjell rrëfime të thella dhe prekse për një plagë që ende është e hapur në ndërgjegjen tonë kombëtare, historinë e grave të dhunuara gjatë luftës. Ky është një moment delikat dhe i dhimbshëm, por i domosdoshëm për t'u trajtuar, sepse përmes kësaj, përmes ballafaqimit, me të vërtetën mund të ndërtojmë një shoqëri më të drejtë dhe më humane. Në këtë kontekst, nuk mund të mos përmendim monumentin e heroinat në Kosovë, që qëndron në Prishtinë si një homazh për mijëra gra të Kosovës që përjetuan dhunën e luftës. Ky moment i ndjeshëm është ndërtuar me mijëra medalje bronzi në formën e gjoksit të nënës, që simbolizon fuqinë, sakrificën dhe dinjitetin e gruas së Kosovës. Ajo na kujton se pa gratë, pa forcën dhe qëndresën e grave, historia jonë do të ishte e menget. Njëherët dua t'ju përshëndes, t'ju uroj një mirëseardhje. Faleminderit.
Now it is my great honor to introduce the reason we are all gathered here today, the brilliant mind behind The Beauty of Choice on Women, Art and Freedom. Wendy Steiner is a celebrated author and scholar whose work sheds light to the intersection of art, women's choices, and personal freedom. Her insights challenge and inspire us, making her book a must-read for all who seek to understand the power of choice. Without further ado, please welcome Wendy Steiner.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor to be able to speak about my book at it's a great honor for me to be able to speak about my book in public library, the Ferguson Library in Stamford, Connecticut. And I want to thank the organizer of this event, Faton Zoganjani, I'm sorry about my pronunciation, and the Albanian American Association. And thanks to all of you for coming. Can you all hear me? Is everything okay? Okay. It's especially a great pleasure to speak in a library because, by definition, it's a place devoted to the values that my book stands for: freedom of expression and respect for learning. And I think that we need to protect these values right now, especially. So, the background of the cover of my book contains detail of this remarkable memorial in Pristina, Kosovo, called Heroinat, or Heroines. It honors the more than 20,000 women who were raped during the genocide of 1998 to 99 in Kosovo. And by calling them heroines, the creators of the memorial were trying to overcome the traditional stigma attached to rape victims in this society. The image on the memorial is a relief of a woman's head, which is a computer-generated composite of many photographs of Kosovar women. And the varying lengths of the pins, if you look under her nose in the detail, you can see some of these pins. The difference in the length is what creates the relief on the surface of sculpture. The head of each pin has a cast in bronze of the same large face. And so there's an implicit statement being made about the relationship between individuals and society as a whole in this. There are 20,000 pins, one for each of these women. And each pin head is meant as a medal being given to honor a heroine. I spend a whole chapter near the end of my book talking about this monument, since it brings together so many of the themes of my book: women, art, freedom of choice, and so on. But I need to backtrack a little bit in order to explain that. So for all my career, I've been writing about aesthetics, the arts, the relations between the arts, and the meaning of art in culture. And I have produced several books on the topic of beauty. The theory of beauty that I was dealing with was a notion that differs from the traditional philosophical ideas of neoclassicism, in which the experience of beauty takes us out of our lives, takes us out of our world, takes us into some other strange state, and shows us a way of being that is outside of time and history and physicality and so on. In my theories, in contrast, we're never so much ourselves as when we are feeling the beauty of something else. That beauty is an experience in which we not only find ourselves liking something else, but we see ourselves liking something else. And in the process, we learn what pleases us. And that experience of seeing vividly what is important to you, what pleases you, what you like, tells you important things about yourself, and changes over time. We all know that we like some things when we were young that we don't like when we're old, and so on. It is a tremendously important and valuable kind of device for self-knowledge. So here are several of the books that I wrote about this notion of interactive beauty. And what they talk about too is that not only this process of liking is not only a revelation about who you are to yourself, but it connects you to other people. Because whenever we like something, we ask whether other people like it too. We want to know how our taste relates to that of other people. And the experience of beauty thus is a kind of creator of social value. So I revise Descartes' notion of the basis of rationalist thought, which is I think, therefore I am. And in my view, it's I like, therefore I am, or I like, therefore we are in this. Many women writers and women characters in art, literature, and so on throughout time have told us about this idea. For example, Sei Shonagon, who was a lady-in-waiting to the empress in the Japanese court around the year 1000, wrote a book called The Pillow Book, which is a classic still read all over the world. It's a pillow book is a kind of diary or a commonplace book where you write down your thoughts from time to time. And in Sei Shonagon's Pillow Book, she presents 164 lists of things that she likes, or some things that she doesn't like. And it's sort of extraordinary. I mean, some of them are things that seem quite arbitrary, and some of them are very deep and emotional and important. She also presents her rationale for this preoccupation with what pleases her, with her taste. She says, if I can spread out a finely woven green straw mat and examine the white bordering with its vivid black patterns, I somehow feel that I cannot turn my back on this world, and life actually seems precious to me. And soon after that, almost seamlessly, she makes a transition from this aesthetic pleasure to the idea of gender justice. She says, how shameful when a man seduces some helpless court lady and having made her pregnant, abandons her without caring in the slightest about her future. So I found this connection between aesthetics and gender justice occurring so long ago really interesting, but it's not just in the Pillow Book. In Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, there's a character called the Wife of Bath, who's had a special power over me all my life, or all my intellectual life anyway. She tells a story in the Canterbury Tales, the Wife of Bath's tale, in which a knight has raped a maiden, and he's condemned to death unless he can find the answer to the question, what do women want most? So he has to go out into the world and find out what women like and want. The Wife of Bath's tale, he gets a lot of different answers. There are all kinds of tricky things in the story. I leave it to you to read it because it's really an amazing story. But it is, at the same time, a very profound meditation on female freedom of choice and the process of negotiating between a man and a woman a just and pleasing share of power. And I think that this has been a kind of project for humanity since there has been humanity. And it's a very important part of what it is to be a person. The Wife of Bath's tale anticipates the philosophy of liberal democracy that was developed by Hobbes and Locke centuries later. And it reveals the civilizing power of female choice. As I write in my book, if women's culture is soft, so is the rain that erodes mountains. I believe that the ultimate romance perpetuated by female choice is nothing less than liberal democracy. Just a personal note here, I not only write books about the arts, but I also write opera librettos. And the very first one I did was based on The Wife of Bath's Tale, and it was called The Loathly Lady, because I was so moved by this story that I wanted to write about it. However, after my last scholarly book came out, which dealt with interactive beauty in 2010, I felt I had more or less said what I had to say about beauty. There were so many troubles coming up in the world at that time, wars and ecological problems and the international rise of totalitarianism, so many difficult problems that to write another book about beauty, whether it's interactive or otherwise, seemed hardly worth it. I was to a party and I was introduced to somebody who asked what I did for a living, and I said I was an esthetician, and it was a woman. She said, "Oh, how wonderful, I had the best facial last week." And at that point I decided, it was time to do something else. So I thought that was the end of my writing books about beauty. But during COVID, I happened to hear about this book. Oh, that was the last book. This book by an ornithologist, an evolutionary ornithologist called Richard O. Prum, who teaches at Yale, just down the coast. And this book is all about Darwinian sexual selection, in which the female of animal species does the choosing. She's the one who chooses a mate, and males of the species display themselves in all kinds of different ways in order to increase their chances of being chosen. Prum and Darwin before him and other people who have written about sexual selection describe this process as aesthetic, that the female of the species chooses a mate on the basis of what pleases her in a male, and she learns as in the mating season what does. So, for example, the bowerbird. I don't know if I think the bowerbird lives in Australia or New Zealand or something, and the male of the species builds these gigantic constructions which are considered architectural masterpieces. The pictures of ones I've seen have been very beautiful. And they're very big, and there's a kind of alleyway in them, and at the end of them inside, the male bowerbird dances and struts, and during mating season, and female bowerbirds go from bower to bower to bower, checking them out. They go shopping, in effect, seeing which bower pleases them most and which bowerbird is the best dancer, and so on, in their opinion. And according to Richard Prum, the most successful bowers, in terms of the ones, the bowerbirds chosen as mates, are the ones that include an escape route for the female, because females of many species work very hard to protect their freedom of choice and to avoid being raped in the process. And I began to think, suddenly this is in the world of science. He's a very well-read man in many respects, Prum is, but he wasn't talking about the kind of things that I talk about, but he was saying the same kinds of things, or discovering the same kinds of things. And I began to think that the topic of beauty and the study of aesthetics were not at all irrelevant to the major problems that affect us. That the experience of beauty is a model for self-realization and free choice. And moreover, it's suffused with an experience of pleasure that makes us value it tremendously. So, and I began, as soon as I began to think about this, I thought how many stories and works of art in general are about male display and female choice and the question of the freedom of the female. I mean, Romeo and Juliet, for example, is a story about how people who've made their choice are prevented by their parents from having it. And you could go through any number of other works that are all about the problems of choice. But in James Joyce's Ulysses, for example, in which the central male characters spend hundreds of pages experiencing the world in terms of the great displays of art. James Joyce ends that book with a very short section by a female character whom we're hearing about for the first time, or hearing from for the first time. And what she does is she is remembering the day that she accepted the proposal from her husband. And the book ends, and yes, I said yes, I will, yes. And that sort of affirmation of female choice and the freedom involved in it is a climactic ending to a great work of literature that deals with everything else that is contained, it seems, in world culture. So I am pleased to have written another book on beauty. And in this book, I deal with, there it is. I deal with a number of artists who, and many of them female artists, who deal with questions of beauty. For example, Kristen Beeler has a long project in which, a very interactive project in which she interviews friends and acquaintances who have scars of one kind or another, or are disfigured in one kind of way or another. And she creates works of art in conversation with them and in response to them that mitigate the damage that's been done to them by something very beautiful that she's created. She does many works of jewelry art and puts them in installations with her photographs and so on. So this is one of her friend Claudette, who later died, who had a mastectomy, and Kristen Beeler took that scar and made it into a brooch. And on the right you see a kind of jewelry prosthesis for that breast, which is gone. Or here's what she did. This is the woman in this was the editor of Metalsmith magazine. Her name is Suzanne Rameljak, and she was at a jewelry conference with Kristen Beeler, and she told her that she had just had this operation and had a big scar on her back. So Kristen Beeler hustled her into a hotel room, and they ordered a bunch of sheets, and they sort of posed her as the Venus de Milo, and the idea was to with the scar fully visible, and the idea is to sort of show what life is like versus conventional stereotypes of female beauty. Or Barbara McCallum, who is a wonderful and very funny artist, whose work represents, she says, her marriage. She's married to a planetary physicist called Robert Johnson, and she makes huge installations of these figures, which are plaster casts of her husband, covered with garments that she makes. And the garments are made of pages of his obsolete research off-prints, which she has applied women's work to. She washes them and bakes them and sews them and burns them and does all kinds of things to them and produces these very beautiful clothes that are very funny. And then the titles she gives to the works are the titles of the off-prints, the articles that she's made the clothes out of. She says, I think of the work as a reflection of a long marriage, bringing together Bob's work and my work and making something that is part of both of us. I think the wife of Bath would have smiled. And here's another one that she did, stimulated desorption of atoms and molecules from bodies in the outer solar system. So the bodies, there's a pun on the bodies, of course, and it's funny. Or Marlene Duma, who is one of the preeminent oil painters in the world at this point. She had a huge retrospective at the 2022 Venice Biennale. And much of her work is a kind of redoing of modernist male art. She lives in Amsterdam. On the left, you see painting by an abstract expressionist, Barnett Newman, or geometric abstractionist, Barnett Newman, and on the right, her redoing of the gate as a female nude. Or here, Picasso's nudes on the left and her missing Picasso on the right. Or, you know, the Weeping Woman, which is one of famous paintings of Dora Maar by Picasso, who was one of his lovers, and he's kind of famous for having mistreated the women in his life very badly. So Marlene Duma redoes that image as Dora Maar, the woman who saw Picasso cry. In other words, she turns the point of view back onto the woman. So now, I mean, there are many works in the book, and I can't really do justice to them so quickly, but I hope you'll want to read more about them. But now I wanted to return to Kosovo a little bit and just say how impressed I was with the public art in the city. Newborn, for example, which is across the street, very busy boulevard from Heroinat, which, and the year that I was there, it gets repainted every year with a different topic, and the year I was there, the topic was Winged Woman. It seems as if the situation of women is really on the minds of people in Kosovo in a very remarkable way. And then I kept on coming across this ancient statue, Goddess on the Throne, which appears on passports for Kosovo and a driver's license and tourist information of all kind. A female figure from the distant past of Kosovo. And finally, of course, Erin itself. So I want to end with the lyrics. I told you I wrote opera librettos, and I wrote lyrics for a song cycle, and these lyrics were never set to music, but I used them in my book. Our founding fathers framed no articles on pussy. The word arrived in the archives centuries later via a bus, driving to make America great again. A million women crocheted woolen wombs in answering shades of shocking pink and marched for life and liberty, mocking a man's pursuit of happiness. And of course, this was written in honor of the Women's March on January 21st, 2017. So that is what I have to tell you about my book, and I hope some of you will look into it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wendy. That was very inspiring. Next, I would like to welcome a very special guest, Virgil Kule, an honored member of the Skanderbeg organization and a former Albanian ambassador to Sweden. With his vast experience and deep insights, we are excited to hear his thoughts. Please welcome Virgil Kule.
Thank you for inviting me to speak about this wonderful book, and especially about the part that's dedicated to the monument, the heroines. I read it with special attention, and I realized that Wendy Steiner's story begins as an academic discussion on the representational values of the heroines' monuments. By making a comparative tour of representative monuments of different styles and epochs, she tries to find a convincing meaning for the monument in question. The discussion gradually leads us into the bitter history that this monument commemorates, and from this point on, the descriptive and comparative monologue turns into a political ethical dialogue with the reader, from which some valuable conclusions are reached for today and for the future. In her essay, Wendy Steiner has given an impressive inside account that provides a fresh explanation of the causes and the consequences of the innumerable episodes of sexual violence on Albanian women in Kosovo. She makes a considerable contribution to our understanding of the events of the 90s by emphasizing testimonies of more than 20,000 victims of rape and torture embodied in the Heroines Memorial. The face contoured by the pins has a twofold meaning. It depicts a survivor and a war heroine. And the question rises, why a war heroine? Because rapes in Kosovo were not rare and isolated acts committed by individuals, but rather they were used deliberately as an instrument to terrorize the civilian population, to extort money from the families, and push people to flee their homes. In short, rape was used as an instrument of war in Kosovo. Wendy puts the question up front. If art can sometimes be part of the hegemonic discourse that shaped the lives of all women, can it also transform that discourse and reshape women's lives? She possessed a very sharp-eyed gift, and she captures the ongoing drama embodied in the same monument, which faces the ever-shining newborn monument letters. And she writes, "The sitting of heroines could not be more upbeat across the street from Newborn, in the bustling center of the capital, surrounded by its own dedicated park. But, unlike Newborn, Heroines was completely deserted the days I saw it. The shrubbery was sparse and scruffy, and the steps of the platform needed repainting. Graffiti covered the benches and the back of the monument. The only graffiti I saw in this showcase of a city, etc., etc." In this perspective, the piece Heroina becomes a kind of stunning tour de force about women who must confront their own terrible pasts, and above all the present unofficial morality, which is never too late for bravery. The author posits that a hidden morality rooted in weakness and stigma is constantly challenging the official morality that values strength, understanding, and nobility. The immediate effect of this underground morality, the traditional one, is the stigma that is still haunting the army of 20,000 or more women in Kosovo. Stigma grows in society because of lack of understanding. Not everyone understands what sexual violence is and its effects on the victims. Moreover, not everyone is aware that the Serbs used mass sexual violence as a tool of war against the entire people of Kosovo. Stigma can cause an erosion of individual self-confidence, so the victims can be drawn from society. Stigma causes discrimination. Society can be ruder and less human in stigmatized individuals, and the families of stigmatized individuals become more humiliated and disturbed. Further influences on the victim can be in the form of fears over the attachment of these stigmas, so that it grows the hesitancy to report, follow up, or seek help over sexual violence acts experienced by the victims. The fear of the Dixonpur track record in the eyes of the public is like a phantom that follows. Steiner's study on the significance of the monument is a compelling and elegant manifesto for a more direct approach to the cause that this monument represents. Rape is a violation of women's sexual autonomy, and that autonomy, as evolutionists argue, is a primordial foundational expression of female selfhood. But personal as it is, rape also destroys the collective whole, writes Wendy. We know that there are power and peril in the collective thinking. Throughout history, humanity has demonstrated a tendency to follow the crowd, rendering individual thinking to the sway of mass opinion. Whether driven by fear, shame, or any fervent belief, entire populations have succumbed to the collective delusions, often with disastrous consequences. No wonder Heroine's Park is deserted, observes Wendy. Despite the apparent freedom of women in Pristina, Kosovar society is deeply patriarchal. In the traditional family conception, a raped person dishonors their family, and once somebody finds out what happened, she has to fear exclusion from society. So today, thousands of victims of sexual violence continue to suffer in shame and silence, often experiencing persistent depression and other psychiatric illnesses. The point is that the majority of the female victims in Kosovo still survive. And understandably, they do not want their identity reduced to that of a raped person. This resistance makes reparations impossible. The National Assembly added survivors of sexual violence to the list of veterans eligible for monthly stipend. But to collect it, women had to confess to their families what happened to them. Paradoxically, in a traditional family, understanding this would mean isolation of the raped person. But there is another side of the medal. Within a family, the episode of rape is rarely kept really secret. For those family members who want to see and want to accept the full truth, and undoubtedly there are plenty of them, there are clear signs displayed by raped women that speak about it. Rape changes all the ways a woman is connected to other people within her family. When a woman feels stigmatized or unappreciated, she begins to change. Not because she wants to, but that she has to. She shifts into a version of herself that helps her get through the day without the recognition that she deserves. She grows quiet, her words become sharp, and her patience wears thin. Her warmth fades into distance, and communication becomes minimal. This isn't a sign of weakness. It's a survival response. She's protecting herself in a space where she no longer feels valued. A woman's energy changes when she's constantly overlooked. She adapts to shield herself from further disappointment. Unfortunately, there are still many family members who find it hard to discuss the matter. Instead of dealing with the situation, they bury their heads in the sand. We have an ostrich effect, or more accurately, an ostrich problem, which makes people avoid negative information, including feedback that could help them find the right approach. The husband, the in-laws, the sons, the brothers, and all the male relatives of a raped woman must understand the reasons of the above-mentioned changes, and instead of aggravating them, they must become aware of the power of appreciation. They must learn that when a woman feels seen, respected, and valued, she flourishes, her kindness returns, her words are thoughtful, and her heart stays open. Just as simple appreciation has the power to rebuild connections, inspire trust, and bring out the best version of a woman. This is why Amnesty International is calling for comprehensive and transformative reparation, including restorative justice, to challenge the stigma and enable survivors' voices to be heard in their families without condemnation. But this means that, as Wendy points out, that the entire structure of Kosovar gender relations should have to change first. But what possible mechanism could see those gears in motion if the United Nations and the national courts have failed, asks Wendy. Transforming this culture will take many forms. The government needs to strengthen the protection and promotion of women's rights to live free from violence, including rape, domestic violence, and trafficking. Most importantly, it needs to reinforce the messages that survivors and other women who continue to experience gender-based violence on a daily basis are not responsible for this violence. But there are good news. Stigma is not inevitable. There are the tools to resist. As Freud says, master your psyche. As Rumi urges, find stillness and clarity. As Goethe advises, seek truth and question ignorance. And there is an awful lot of ignorance on gender-based violence to be questioned through group action. Wendy emphasized that only the group action encourages abused women to post their personal rape stories on a collective website and to add their intimate testimony to that of others in class action suites. In doing so, these women are exposed to their rawest individuality, but at the same time they use their singularity to demand justice for all women. Their personal traumas coalesce in a unified feminist story, transforming atomized victims into collective agents and inspiring emulation by other women throughout the world. Today, the mechanisms that drive public behavior have become more powerful and pervasive. In our modern era, social media and digital communication have amplified the speed at which ideas spread. A single narrative, true or false, can cascade through millions in moments, triggering widespread reaction before reason has a chance to intervene sometimes. But we have 20,000 more than true narratives in Kosovo, which digital communication can spread with a dizzying speed. Associations and agencies dealing with this issue should intensively use this very effective tool. First, to make it clear that the phenomena of rape was a weapon of war of the Serbs, therefore a war crime with over 20,000 victims. Second, to explain that it is a double crime to exercise stigma on these victims who emerged from the war with specific wounds that take a long time to heal. And third, that the crime becomes triple if it's kept hidden and forgotten by the society, turning these victims of war into dead people walking. Coming to the end of the essay, Wendy Steiner definitely shifts the aesthetic discussion on the monument by delving into the still unresolved problematic that lies behind it. She throws her gaze beyond the unfruitful debate that took place among some feminist activists who believed that this commemorative practice reduced women's experience. Heroine, she says, does not please everyone, writes the author. How could it? It's a work of art. This brings us back to the title of the essay, Art Against Rape. Sure, we do not expect that through an artwork like the Memorial Heroinat, the Kosovar society could win the battle against rape. But that memorial is capable of dramatizing the consequences of the use by the Serbs of that war instrument called rape, and put in motion complex anti-rape educational campaigns. Wendy is telling to the reader that this monument is not just an art of work. It's a powerful visual statement about a bitter past that must never be forgotten. It reflects a way in which art is used to remember larger-than-life narratives of historic events, blending horrible facts and encouraging resilience in a way that it would influence generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. What is an event celebrating art without some music? We are delighted to have two wonderful musicians, Pravera Sula and Blerina Muccioli, who will perform for us today. Please let's enjoy this moment of artistic expression.
I've written several books on memorialization. I was the chair of the jury that chose the Denkmal, Europe's murdered, the Denkmal, to the memorial to Europe's murdered Jews in Berlin, the Peter Eisenman design. It was on the 9/11 memorial jury as well, which shows a Michael Abad, Peter Walker design for the memorial downtown, New York City. And I end up asking the same question of all these memorials: toward what end and in what kind of figure are we remembering these events? Why? And what does it mean for a nation to remember the 9/11 attacks, for example, in these two gigantic voids surrounded by trees, remembering both life in the trees and the death in the void of an absence left behind by the mass murder, nearly 3,000 people on that day. When I discovered through Faton this memorial, and Faton introduced me to the Consul General for Kosovo, I think it was 2018. I had just been asked to head a jury in Budapest for their national memorial to the women victims of rape in wartime. The first such memorial, they told me, to the memory of women raped during wartime. And I got to, I thanked them for asking me to chair this panel, but then I had to remind them that, in fact, there was another great memorial in Pristina, Kosovo, which actually remembers the averted genocide of the Kosovar Albanians by the Serbs in the figure of a raped women, the 20,000 raped women during that war, and that it came to emblematize exactly the definition of a genocide. When the Nazis set out to murder all the Jews, they concentrated primarily on the women and children, that is, the procreators of the Jewish race in their mind. That's how you get rid of a people. You begin with the women and the children. The men will die out by themselves. So when Faton told me about this, and I met with the Consul General about this amazing memorial, I just asked the simple question that I would just like to leave hanging in the air here for everybody to think about and maybe to try to answer. What does it mean in Kosovo to remember both the birth of a nation, the averted genocide at the hands of the Serbs, and the genocide itself in the figure of 20,000 victims of rape? And just leave that hanging. It's the only one in the world, the only national memorial in the world to the victims of rape during the attempted genocide. Other countries have tried it. Hungary never did build its memorial, the one we chose, but this was built, and it was built right after the war and right after the birth of the state. Yeah. So I congratulate Kosovar Albanians on this amazing achievement, and I congratulate Wendy on attempting to answer that question. What does it mean for a country to remember its own averted genocide in the figure of a raped woman? Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here. Ms. Steiner, thank you so much for this great book. This is a sad story of our sad history of living through genocide. Unfortunately, I feel that that story has not been promoted enough, has not been known to the world enough. I think that perpetrators of the rape are looming free in Belgrade. Most of them. Few of them have been caught and brought to justice. So I hope this book helps. But my question is for the ambassador as well, and I like his review. What can we do more? What can we do more so these criminals are brought to justice, so other criminals in the future think twice before they use the rape as a weapon of war? What can we do more? Thank you so much.
I think told the stories of her rape and took an hour of Senate time to do that. And I think that was a very shocking thing for people to hear, and at the same time a very important thing for them to hear. It's making these stories known, making the perpetrators of them known, casting shame on them, and not allowing shame to be an easy thing to deal with. I mean, it is extraordinary when people, simply deny all kinds of accusations of women of their rape and sort of pass them off as unimportant. That women have to be believed when they tell their stories, and they have to be respected when they tell their stories. So.
Well, now I would love to welcome to stage Faton Zogjani.
Përshëndetje, unë quhem Faton Zogjani, për ndryshe jam antari i bordit të shoqatës shqiptare amerikane Skënderbej. Spori dua t'ju falenderoj gjithë pjesëmarrësve për kohën, mundin, po mbi gjitha në kohën cilën keni ardhur, se ne kemi llogaritë edhe kjo mos që ashtu nuk do vi për shkak kushteve që s'na për cilën, po lutja jonë të secili që kemi çu ftesën, e sidomos të gjinia femrore, kemi insistuar që ato të jenë sa më në numër si pjesëmarrëse, sepse siç tha dhe shkrimtarja Wendy, edhe zotri Kule dhe profesor James, ato janë viktimat. Prandaj unë bëj apel që në tarmen ne si burra, ne si shoqëri, të bëjmë edhe më tepër që me të vërtet ajo që tha zotnia Agim Aliçkaj, më këtë heshtje mos t'ja rrisim krejt armiqve, edhe kriminalëve, edhe kudo që të shkojnë ata, të përdorin fjalë ofenduese, edhe të tregojnë historitë e tyne në ndodhit e motrave tona, grave tona, edhe femrave tona. Në anën e majt I kemi 2 artikuj të gazetave, masandej, mas të përfundër kjo do t'i shini. Për fat keq janë në gjuhën, është për fat mirë, po ne s'kemi arrit me I përkthy, janë në gjuhën norvezeze, po janë 2 dëshmitarët e para, cilat publikisht e kanë pranu, edhe kanë dëshmu dhunën ndaj regjimit serb. Në artikullin e parë, sipër lart, do ta shihni një vizatim që është bërë prej gjakut të atyre grave. Është shumë përshmues, shumë dhunues. Po është në diçka sa është në gjendje me bë krime e çfarë masakra dhuna kanë bërë sërt ndaj grave tona. Nëse në anën e djathtë keni prap 2 portrete. Në këtë portretin e parë ku prezantohet një dritare, kjo shtëpi e djegur është në komunën e Fushë Kosovës, po në këtë shtëpi janë kallë 100 viktima. Ju lutem, 100 viktima vetëm në një shtëpi. Ndërsa fotografia tjetër atje, portreti, do t'i shihni edhe masi të përfundon ky takim, janë një pjesë e familjes Deliaj në fshatin në Bri. Atëherë, unë I kam 2 apele për ju edhe për gjithë ata që na dëgjojnë na përsjellin. Ju lutem mos t'i harrojmë krimet, po t'i prezantojmë në mënyrën më institucionale. Një apel që du me përsjell përsëri, e që I kërkoj falje zotni Agim Aliçkaj që po e kopjoj, po ishte një apel që u drejtu neve si kamp, e si shqiptar, e që ka të bëjë me unitetin. Ju lutem, sa ma unik t'jem, krejt të gjonat do të zgjidhen, edhe do të marrin kohën e dume. Sa ma të përçon që jem, do të besmi këta që jem. Edhe njerë Ju falenderoj shumë për pjesëmarrjen, bëjmë 2 fjalë në gjuhën angleze për shkak profesorit dhe profesor Jamesit, edhe mysafirëve tjerë. I would like to thank each of one for participation today. Miss Wendy, there was a great presentation, and I'm happy that we had this relationship, and we will be more friends in the future, and we would like you also to be in Pristina, probably during this year. I would like also to thank Mr. James Young. I can say very easily a friend of mine. Thank you, James, for being here. I would like to thank also Miss Phyllis Levin here. She is one of the American writers and poet, Dr. Shenwise. Without forgetting Mr. Richard Kule, wish you all the best and thank you for coming.
Now comes one of the most exciting parts, our book signing session. Wendy will be signing copies for the beauty of the choice, so please feel free to line up to have your book signed.
Today, for me, it's a wonderful day for me.
one person from United States, very well-known book writer, professor, Miss Wendy Steiner. Today you brought me back to 1999. Whatever happened in Kosovo with the genocide and massacre and 20,000 women raped in Kosovo. Today you made like a flower growing things. You went with the very details representing our women in Kosovo. Looks like you are there for a long time and you searched so well, and then you came with this beautiful book where it says The Beauty of the Choice on Woman, Art, and Freedom. From you, Wendy Steiner. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to have talked to all these people and told them about my work.
The whole speech, your speech, was everything from inside came out. Looks like you wrote and write everything you feel from inside. Who was the person who directed you to know Kosovo?
It's such an interesting story. I was telling James Young, who was asked the question at the beginning of the question period. This is a couple of years ago. I was talking about this book that I was thinking of writing about women's freedom and its relation to art. And he said, "Oh, do you know that there is a monument for rape victims in Kosovo?" And I said, "No, I did not know." But I would love to find out more. So he arranged for me to meet his friend, Fatou, who arranged this event. And we talked a little bit, and I said, well, I think I'm going to go to Pristina. And I went to
Pristina.
No, I went to Pristina, and then Prizren. It's Prizren.
Okay.
Okay, and I walked around by myself the very first day, all alone, and it was very, very interesting. Of course, I had done some reading ahead of time, and then Fatou put me in contact with Avni Spahiu, the first ambassador from Kosovo to the United States. And I had been walking around all over the place, and I got this phone call from America saying that the ambassador wants to meet with me. So I went to a cafe, and he was there, and we sat, and he took me around for another 2 days in Kosovo and told me many things that I would never have known about without his help. So
I saw you presenting heroine at the Kosovës. You present everything. Then you saw there so many stuff, and then what do you think? What do you think about women in Kosovo that can't go freedom to say I was raped? You know, because so many women they can't come to the point to say.
Well, it's the same here. I mean, there are women who complain that they have been raped here, but they often have terrible troubles as a result, and there are many women who are too traumatized and ashamed to talk about it. So I'm not surprised that that is the case in Kosovo as well, but I know from what I've read that it's much worse for them. Because rape is considered the fault of the victim, which is so unfair.
Who did this book? I see this design. It's beautiful design.
Did you see the first slide of my thing? That was my design. And I wanted the press to use that. I mean, I had fit the letters into the faces and everything, and they said it would be too hard for people to read. So they rearranged it a little bit, and the press designer did this.
This makes me something
to understand, you put so many faces here. You see these faces. What does this mean to you? It means this is all women's?
Well, this is the surface of heroine.
Heroine, yes.
Yeah. But it's about the situation of women as the ones who choose, and women in being in the same boat, you know, having the same situation throughout human history of being, you know, faced.
So I want people from everywhere to know you more. You've been professor for so many years.
For so many years.
And then you wrote so many books. And then where you see yourself in the future? What are you going to do more?
Well, I also write opera librettos, and I paint. You know, I retired as a professor 11 years ago, so I'm not teaching now, and I don't know whether I'll write another book or not. This one just came out, and I just moved to Philadelphia from New York, so I'm arranging to have a new apartment built and so on. So I have many more things going on. I don't know. But I really want these ideas to get out into the world. And
so do you want to do another book for Kosovo? Because Kosovo right now is doing so good. It's doing a great economy. It's very nice. People there are very nice. Maybe you have to do some book for good reason.
Oh, but listen, I mean, I am so ignorant. You know, I'm an outsider, and I'm very conscious of that. I mean, to have somebody come in from the outside and say things about your culture, you know, I said them in this book because they were connected. I saw the connection to my own culture, and so I felt I wanted to speak about it. But you know, you have to be careful about telling people who they are when you're an outsider.
I want to say thank you very much for whatever you've done for our people, and then we are so proud of. Actually, we Albanian. We have United States part of our life for any reason, for any safety. So, and thank you very much for whatever you've done for us.
Well, thank you. You've done a lot for me. I'm very grateful.
And I hope you're going to visit Kosovo again, have fun, and then go for good reason.
Yes, thank you.
Po çka solli e mira ty marrë në Shtetet Bashkuara të Amerikës, të e pa pas vendin e mirë, punën e mirë, edhe çka I lakmove Amerikës?
Artistat lakmojnë në gjëra të mira, do me thonë se e dojnë të bukura dhe kanë qef me lëviz, mërzitën prej një vendi. Unë nuk ku mërzita prej vendit tim, po tash ta provoj diçka të re.
Si që e njohin njerëzit këtë Blerina është një artiste, një pianiste, një prezentuse televizionit, një regjisore, o nuk di dhe sa pun tjera I bante.
Vallaj, më ka met veç edhe me marrë me ly mure. Po kjo është, me thonë që the artistat lëvizin poshtë nalt, vazhdimisht janë kërkus. Dhe kjo shpeshherë në shtaj I bën që ata kur mos muni rahat, se janë çdo herë në kërkim gjanave të reja. Po është okej, mirë, pse mos me provu, Amerika është ëndra e të gjithëve, unë pata mundësinë me ardh edhe po e shijoj profesionin, këtu si kam ardh, kam njoftu shumë njerëz të mirë, shqiptar të mirë, edhe me njëherë fillova me evente, kështu diçka shumë e mirë, urej që të vazhdoj, kështu, të më merë Amerika me të mirë.
Ti e përmene veni mundësive.
Po.
E thoi një fjallë popullore, se kërë bleta kur vjen me atë koshisin për atjet, bjen gjithë shka. Edhe ti këto, po më duket, se veç sa ke mu ekspozu dhe më shumë. Talenti edhe dhe puna jota është e paljallshme se që di me vite që punan, por që ta mërmenja këtu në Amerikë, qka mujte me vrejten, edhe qka po do të fokusohesh, se na dojna me ditë në Amerikan qka do me bo këto?
Qka vrejta në fillim, vrejta më kanë thonë se Amerika ka shumë mundësi. Edhe si erdha, e vrejta ma të keqen, nështë edhe më të mirën. Po, sigurisht që njeriu duhet me eksploru për me e gjetë vetën, sepse kur të vesh në Amerikë shef dikon që është ma përpara se ti, shef gjona që nështë si ke provu në Kosovë, ose në vendindjen tonë që s'tu ka dhënë mundësia, edhe ti duke provu, zakonisht kjo ndodh për artistë, se dojnë gjona të reja, edhe sfidat shfaqen përpara, po krahas sfidave ti edhe mëson. Dhe duke mësu edhe besoj që të gjithë edhe ti më ke thonë se çdo herë, çdo sfidë mëson diçka edhe je dhe të hapa përpara. Kështu që unë sapo kam marrë dhe nuk e di kur do ta arrij hapin e vet, po gradualisht kam fillu se me qit hapin, ndoshta hapin e mbar, nuk e di.
A disa kënaqësi e madhe është kur kam një prezantuese, një personi që den me realizu gjanat, edhe e ke pranë veten, vetëm se falenderoj Zotit që po i bashkon njerëzit e mirë me punët e ndryshme, se ky vend i bekuar ka nevojë për njerëz si që jeni ju e shumë tjerë. Por unë të kam të uru sukses në të ardhëm, edhe mos në ndalosh, edhe kem qef më të po me një televizion që shto me nga po pak me misione se
po valla, edhe unë kam qef shumë me u inkuadru edhe me qenë pjesë e televizioneve në Amerikë. Pse, se çka kam vrej këtu që njerëz janë shumë pozitiv, edhe ne shqiptarët jemi shumë pozitiv, jemi të dashur, jemi të hapur, dhe po mendoj që nështë edhe kjo na kish ndihmu që me qenë sa ma kur t'jesh pranë publikut ata dojnë pozitivitet, edhe kjo më kish ndihmu që tamam me qenë para kamerën vendin e duhur.
Atëherë të nderuar shqiptarë që një këtu në New York, kush keni fëmijë që kanë nevojë të ushtrojnë pianon dhe të jenë të talentuar dhe të bëjnë një muzikë me piano, ja ku kemi profesoreshën këtu, kjo së shpejti besoj që do të vjen me klasat ose me vend, çato
mundësit janë të shumta, andaj nuk i dihet se ka edhe qysh edhe tek kamerë, po them se gjithka mundet me më po.
Faleminderit shumë, ishte kënaqësi me të vërtetë.
Gjithashtu, kënaqësia ishte e imja që të kem një intervistë në Noli TV si shqiptari më i suksesshëm në këtë sferë në televizion në Amerikë.
Faleminderit shumë. Si të duk së dita?
Well, si ditë me shi që ishte dili na solli libri.
Interpretimi yt me atë gitarën e bukur, me të vërtet në i kutrunin që i thonë në Shqipërisë.
Po, për një tash era, për me ik, edhe kur pushon, me të ardhë prapë.
Me të vërtet unë kur të pash nuk njofta, se tojnë si pranvera, edhe çdo herë pranvera është në komitetin tonë shqiptar dhe gjithmonë jep atë më të bukurën në shqiptari, si nga prezenca jote në çdo lami që e ban, je një person i veçantë të dish.
Faleminderit, po unë kam nderin që jam sot edhe me ty, edhe me Borën, me shumë artistë të vërtet të komunitetit tonë, që ndoshta pak duket sikur në harres, por me një telefon tonë mbledhen, se kush na mbledh? Na mbledh atë dashuria, na mbledh kultura, na mbledh tradita. Sot në mblodhi jo vetëm libri për gratë përdhunuara, 20.000 gratë përdhunuara, por në mblodhi dhe 17 vjetori Pavarësisë Kosovës.
Si e mendoni ju, është mirë të heshtim, është mirë të ngrinim zërin më lartë që të largojmë atë pushtetin serb një herë për gjithmonë?
Për mendimin tem, bëra një takim sot, unë kam qenë në Prishtinë dhe kam parë skulpturën, kam marr feedback nga njerëz të ndryshëm që e interpretojnë sipas mënyrës së tyre, domethënë skulpturën, edhe është më se e pranueshme se çdo njeri e shikon artin me syrin e vet dhe nuk e shikon me syrin e artit. Edhe unë mendoj që në mes të Prishtinës të jetë një skulpturë e tillë dhe gjithë njerëzit të kalojnë 24 orë në hundën e saj skulpture dhe mos të bëhet asgjë për këto 20.000 gra të përdhunuara, është për të ardhur keq. Dikujt nuk dua të futem politikë, dikujt thotë që shteti nuk ka bërë asgjë,
Shteti i Kosovës nuk ka bërë asgjë. Edhe në qoftë se ato nuk kanë marrë asnjë lloj kompensimi, ato gra duhet të kenë kompensimin moral që nuk e kanë. Në qoftë se shteti nuk e jep, media nuk e jep, atëherë shoqëria nuk ndërgjetësohet. Dhe këto gra do jenë gjithmonë të vdekura, siç ta këtu, të vdekura por që ecin gjallë.
Faleminderit, ishte kënaqësi.
Lutem.
Bora, prezentimi yt ishte brillant edhe si u emocionove, se me të vërtet nuk është edhe lehtë të bëhet ky prezantim për ato motrat tona që janë dënuar.
Përshëndetje Nuli. Sot vërtet ishte një rikthim brapa 25 viteve kur bota u trondit nga dhuna që u shtru ndaj nënave, grave dhe femrave shqiptare në Kosovë në luftë. Përpos varëve të luftës u përballën femra shqiptare edhe me thyrjet moralit. Sot këtu në shoqatën Skënderbeu që dua t'i falenderoj shumë që më hapën dyrë dhe më emëruan si sekretare shoqatës, unë ndjeva shumë e privilegjuar në këtë takim, sepse përpos që u promovu libri i Wendy Steiner për femrat të dhunuara në artikullin e saj 10 që flitet për femrat të dhunuara në Kosovë, ne këmbyem edhe librin tim 20 Years Silence që është kushtuar dhunimeve seksuale në Kosovë. Dhe mysafirët të gjithë pothuajse ishin gati në vaj për histori të hidhura që ende s'ka drejtësi për to. Unë ndjeva edhe shumë krenare që edhe unë në një farë forme e kam hedhë një piku i ndeti, si thojnë, edhe unë në një farë forme e kam ngritë zërin si autore, që përmes realitetit, përmes shkrime, përmes gazetave, përmes gjërave të tjera të kërkojmë një farë forme drejtësisë. Nuk është një numër i vogël i femrave të dhunuara, mbi 20.000. Edhe memoriali Heroinat është një memorial që dëshmon një të kaluar të hidhur të femrës shqiptare. Në prag të festës 17 shkurtit, ne duhet festojmë normalisht, po edhe duhet i kujtojmë momentet tragjike që kanë ndodhur në rrugtimin e pavarësisë Kosovës.
A duhen motrat tona të heshtin apo duhet ta ngrisin zërin edhe të dinë që ta largojmë atë okupatorin sër për gjithmonë, një herë për gjithmonë të dihet ky gjenocidi që është bën në ato zonjat tona.
Motrat tona normal kur dihet në Kosovë që morali ka qenë mbi të gjitha për një femër, i kuptoj të gjitha që kanë heshtur gjatë këtyre viteve, i përgëzoj ato që kanë dalë dhe në mënyrë publike kanë dëshmuar realitetin e hidhur, mirë po ne duhet i kuptojmë edhe sikur me emra anonim të dalin me video të mbuluara, të dalin të prezantojnë dhunën, sa më shumë femra që dalin në skenë dhe të tregojnë realitetin, aq më shkurtër bëhet rruga për të drejtat e tyre, për drejtësi në favor të femrave shqiptare.
Bora, faleminderit, nuk kam ndërmend kjo muaj më shumë se sa më shumë kjo muaj kam detaje shumë të thella të nxjerrin nga ju se edhe ju jeni edhe një etnologe, ke shkruar libra, ke botu libra. Unë kështu që për fond kisha pas dëshirë të falenderoj shumë edhe për kontributin tënd që e bën këtu në komunitetin tonë shqiptar, këtu në Shtetet Bashkuara të Amerikës.
Shumë faleminderit Noli. Unë besoj se jam e lindur për të përçuar një mision tek gjithë popujt për kombin tonë. Edhe jam shumë e fat që ndoshta edhe jam e guximshme në çdo aspekt të flas për gruan shqiptare, për sakrificën e saj, për punën e saj, për etnologjinë e saj, edhe për moralin e saj, që është gjëja më e shenjtë.
Faleminderit shumë, ishte kënaqësi.